No, it's not. It's not harmful. And you wanna know why? You wanna know why it's not harmful? Because it's a response to misogyny. Who would have guessed? And guys, this is a follow-up to my last video, so if you haven't seen the last video, I recommend you go see the last video. But if you haven't, I'll just lightly debrief on what happened that last video. So I basically compared misogyny and misandry in terms of how much harm they do in their historical, cultural, and societal context. And I explicitly make a counterpoint in the video where I talk about how only taking into account the literal word definition actually circumcises the severity of it, right? So I'm on Bing right now, right? And I look up the definition for misandry, and it means a hatred of men. Go to Google, the definition is defined as the hatred of, contempt for, or ingrained prejudice against men or boys. And sure, yeah, we can follow things by the textbook definition or whatever. But I argue by doing that, you're doing a great disservice to the word. Because now you're no longer seeing the historical context behind why that word is a thing. And basically, I go into how misandry is a response to misogyny, which is the historical context behind it, right? But let's say we ignored all of that. Well, ladies and gentlemen, that's how you get a commenter like... Sorry, I just had to go brush my hair because it was bothering me so much. But ladies and gentlemen, when you ignore that entire historical context speech and why I even said it in the first place, you'll get a comment like this from a person named Enchilada. Let's get into his comment. So Mr. or just person Enchilada, he comments with a timestamp, misandry, by definition, is the hatred, contempt, or prejudice against men. That's literally just the Google definition that we just read. But anyways, they continue on by saying, to claim that no misandrist thinks men are worthless and that they all just do not want anything to do with men is a massive overgeneralization. There are multiple instances of women being hateful towards men. Misandry does not simply equate to ignoring men. Furthermore, saying one is worse because of current physical outcome averages minimizes the psychological, emotional, and social damage that systemic or widespread misandry can inflict on men, such as increasing suicide rates. In conclusion, please do more research on how exactly misandry is hurtful instead of just saying it isn't. And you guys, there is so much wrong with this comment. First of all, you're pulling out textbook web definitions when I already shot down that counter argument in the video. In the video itself, I literally say, I talk about how harmful it is to only talk about the literal context of things, like the literal definition and all that, throwing out the historical and cultural context. Not only that, he accuses me, or they accuse me, of overgeneralizing. People usually use that as an accusation when somebody is arguing that a whole demographic is being this much harmful or this extremist way of harmful. I deadass just said that, and in this part I was comparing misogynist to misandrist, where I said every misogynist, or at least most misogynists, don't see women as people, and no misandrists don't see men as people. And that's just dependent on the misandrists. So me saying that last part is not generalizing all of them. It's not making me seem like all misandrists are as innocent as whatever this guy is saying. So, and then he says, to claim that no misandrist thinks men are worthless, Literally, that's not the word I used. The word I used is whether a misandrist sees a man as human depends on the misandrist. So you completely glossed over that part just to completely be contrarian or something. Like, I completely don't get the agenda here, you know what I mean? And guys, I had some comments that I should cut off my conjoined twin, so like, no conjoined twin anymore, guys. No more catfish filter, even though I'm still equally as handsome. And he also goes on to say that saying one is worse because of the current physical outcome minimizes the psychological, emotional, and social damage that systemic or widespread misandry can inflict on men. Okay, so I think you had a little bit of a point with going with psychological and emotional and social, but systemic? Widespread? You want to know how many countries allow full women rights? 14. Women have rights in 14 countries. And you want to know how many countries there are? Over 250. Yo, so like, in some of these countries, I'm pretty sure the women would get genuinely crucified and tortured and murdered for even insinuating that they hate one man. But yeah, it's systemic misandry, right? It's a widespread issue, right? Buddy, widespread misandry, systemic misandry, is not a thing. Anything, misandrists are most prevalent and most vocal online. And you want to know where they're online? Probably in those 14 countries where they have rights to actually speak without permission. I don't know about you, but that doesn't sound like systemic misandry to me. So guys, I responded to this comment with a voice memo, right? And I did like 4 or 3 voice memos. But I can't play it out loud on the computer. It's only for like phone and all that. So I'll just read it out to you. I said, while I can acknowledge that this kind of misandry has actual harm and has actual outcome, the thing is, misandry is still a response to misogyny. And people who feel like that stuff is demeaning to them are either insecure or don't know that those misandrists aren't actually talking about them. And it's not the misandrist's responsibility to not say, or to say, I don't hate all men, or it's not all men. You just have to know that it's not you. Which is a statement I stand behind, because if you actually take into consideration the cultural and historical context of misandry, you'll know that it's a response to misogyny, and that it's not an inherent, natural, or systemic hatred against men. It literally wouldn't make sense for misandry to exist if it was blatantly just hating men because they're men. Then what does that really mean? They don't hate men because they were born with cocks. They hate men because of the patriarchy and because they conform with the patriarchy. That is why the historical context of misandry is that misandry is a response to misogyny. But I guess that just doesn't make sense to this person. And he's going to use the very tactic that I refuted against. And so this person continues to say, if a person only dislikes bad or abusive men, that isn't misandry. That's just disliking bad people. For it to be misandry, the hostility must be directed at men simply because they are men. And what are we doing? What are we doing? We're using the textbook definition when I specifically shot down that claim. I shot down the claim that using the textbook definition of misandry won't make you fully understand what misandry is. Anyways, guys, I had to take like a 30-minute break just to wind down a little bit, you know? Always healthy. So far, I feel like this guy genuinely believes that misandry is not a response to misogyny, but a response to men being born men. Which, by the way, doesn't make any fucking sense. Historically, culturally, or societally. And this is why going off of the literal word definition, fucking dictionary definition, is really harmful and makes you think limitedly. And guys, if you have already grasped the concept of the video, like, you already get it, right? But this thread goes on. It goes on. So, to their comment of when they said, if a person only dislikes bad or abusive men, that isn't misandry, that's just disliking bad people. For it to be misandry, the hostility must be directed at men simply because they are men. Which is not what misandry is, by the way. That's not what misandry is. I'm sorry. So you already got it wrong with saying that misandry has systemic outcomes. It doesn't. It literally doesn't. Okay? And now he's explaining misandry in a way that isn't actual misandry. And guys, taking a word by only its word definition and dictionary definition is literally a semantic flaw. It is a semantic limitation. So we already have it down that this person's argument is heavily flawed because there is no systemic oppression that misandrists cause. Misandrists don't just hate men because they were born men. So let's dive into the responses where I basically say I don't think the presence of misandrists are actually causing harm. So I responded to his comment saying in a voice memo, okay, response number 2, so while this is something that is completely avoidable if you change up your mindset about how you go about these things, I'm referring to misandrists, because in all reality, these things are so easily avoidable. Misandrists online. But women living in their day-to-day life, trying to avoid men that are misogynist, it's almost impossible on their day-to-day life. This is why misogyny is a bigger problem than misandry. A misandry is a suppressed response to misogyny, and that is not a systemic problem. So simply that the fact that misandry is a response to misogyny and the patriarchy, which are systemic problems, doesn't make misandry a systemic problem. Actually categorizes misandrist into an oppressive problem because all of these people are being oppressed by the patriarchy. So, and then my next voice memo after that was, okay, response number 3, you also really seem to forget that, yeah, misandry is the prejudice against men. That is the textbook definition, though. But the cultural and societal context of the word is that it's a response to misogyny. So misandrists are completely going after misogynists, not men, because they're men. They're going after misogynists, not men, because they are men. And they didn't do anything wrong. That doesn't make any sense. And right now, I'm actually having to tell this person what misandry is. Dude, it's like trying to teach calculus to a baby. And that's probably not a good comparison, but I'm just trying to decipher how hard it is to explain this to someone who's only seeing it for its word definition. And so they do a weird type of red herring agreement where that last part where I said misandrist hating men because they're men doesn't make sense. They do a weird red herring agreement that they say, yes, that doesn't make sense, but that's what misandry is. Lashing out against the male demographic due to being harmed by individuals in that demographic. How many times are we just gonna straight up fucking lie? Because this person at this point, is arguing that misandrists hate men for no reason other than they're a man. That doesn't make sense, culturally, historically, or societally. That literally only makes sense if you're taking the dictionary definition to a T, right? And that within itself is a semantic flaw. And then I have to reiterate this thing that I just mentioned earlier in the video, where I said, At this timestamp, I said misandrists don't believe men aren't people depending on the misandrist. Misandrists don't believe men aren't people depending on the misandrist. Depending on the misandrist. So let's continue reading. So obviously I wasn't generalizing the whole demographic. And when you watch videos like this, it should be very obvious that the speaker won't be able to represent or talk about each different type of subcategory of the demographic they're talking about. Because accusing of overgeneralization removes the possibility that the people I'm talking about actually exist. And the people I'm talking about is misandrists who hate misogynists, because that's what misandry is. It's a response to misogyny. It's not a response to men being born men or being born with male genitalia, because that wouldn't make sense. Because that's the same thing with misogyny, is that misogyny also has cultural context, and it's not just a hatred of women. It's not just that. And the thing is, misogyny has been more systemically pushed. Like, not even more. It is the thing that has been systemically pushed. Which is why we see more physical and material harm coming from misogyny rather than misandry. I gotta stop missing that pause button, but... So, and then I conclude with saying, and I'm sorry if I've been messing with my hair all this video. Like, this is bedhead, right? I showered last night and this is bedhead. So, anyways, I conclude with saying that in a voice memo, let's get the notepad lighting out. I conclude in a voice memo saying, maybe I don't want that actually. I conclude saying in a voice memo, let's get to it. I say, anyways, all in all, if you as a man feel attacked by misandrists, that is not a systemic problem. That is a personal problem, and I'm not going to elaborate. But that's just what I'm going to conclude with, because this type of comment is so stupid. I feel like you can accuse of overgeneralization, but you can tell that wasn't my intention. Like, what are we doing? And then here's person B that is sucking this person's cock or genitalia. I will get into them right after, right? But their final response was, whether it was your intention or not, I cannot tell. But it came across that way, so I pointed it out. This wasn't even my main problem. Your point was that misandry and misogyny are not equally harmful, yet you describe misogyny based on its worst real-world outcomes, violence and oppression, but you frame misandry by its intentions, a response, which to me seems like bias. In your first reply, and people who feel like that stuff is demeaning to them are either insecure or don't know how that misandrists aren't actually talking about them, when those women are talking about them simply because they are a man. Being a response to misogyny doesn't mean that misandry isn't targeted towards the entire male demographic. There is a lot of cognitive dissonance going on right now. I feel like we are both talking about different things, but the thing he is talking about is way less existent of what I'm talking about. There is hardly any women whose logic is, I hate men because they're men and they're born with dicks. There's hardly any women who think like that. And a lot of the time, misandrists can't decipher why they hate men, they just do. But my decipherance of that is that they hate most men because most men are misogynist, because most men conform with the patriarchy that pushes misogynist ideologies. And you know, this is segment 3 of me recording. And person B over here, right? And okay, so that last person's response, that person A's response, last response, I didn't respond to it. You wanna know why? Because I'm making this video, right? I'm making this fucking video. But person B, man, I don't know if this is this dude's alt account or what, or just some stranger that's just unconditionally sucking his cock. But to my response, like at the end of all of my voice memos, person B responded with all that for some baby crying because you can't admit you wrong. 2 rolling on the floor laughing emojis. By the way, before this, he wasn't saying so much AAVE. And That was only his response to all of my messages or all of my comments. The only reason I commented this many times is because I just didn't think this was video worthy. But now that that sentiment has changed, or that my thought about that has changed, this really is video worthy. And it is my pleasure to get views off of your ignorance. It really is. Because that other follow-up video where I said the incels found me, so I found their search history, I got a good 88 views off of that, man. Man, that felt good, man. Like, that, this just feels like the greatest content farm ever. Like, I make a video on a subject that isn't that convoluted and is really straightforward. Some weirdo has a problem with it, and then I make a video on them and it's entertaining. But anyways, let's go into person 2, person B, you know? And this comment refers to the timestamp of where I mentioned the Holocaust. And you want to know why I mention it? I'm not mentioning it because it has any correlation or any similarities with the misandry and misogyny epidemic. I'm simply using it as a reference for semantics because the Holocaust, or Holocaust as a word, has a definition, but if we strip away all the cultural, societal, and historical context from that word, then the event of the Holocaust is gonna have no meaning. So, like, that's the only reason that I even brought up the Holocaust, wasn't because it actually has correlation to misogyny and misandry, but it's because it's a semantical reference, right? So this comment reads, "The Holocaust was completely different and had zero correlation to this. I know you are not flat out saying it was comparable to the Holocaust, but by mentioning it, you make people think you are. Also, please just do research because most of this is wrong." And I read person B's comment first, and then I read person A's bullshit ass comment. But person B, his research, or the thing that they're wanting me to research, is referring to what person A said, where they speculated that the presence of misandrists have a psychological, social, systemic, and widespread negative outcome. Which you already know why the fuck I disagree with that, depending on how much of this video you've actually watched. I mean, at this certain point in the video, you should know why, So this person is talking professionally, right? So this, in contrast to them using rolling on the floor laughing emojis and AAVE by missing letters, buddy, what are we doing? You went from being genuinely concerned and even making yourself out to be the victim by saying that the presence of misandrists is genuinely hurting your demographic, to all that baby crying because you can't admit you're wrong. Brother, I just gave you all the evidence on why your side is wrong, and you genuinely don't have anything else to say about it. So, like, that sentence doesn't really mean anything to me because I know I'm right. But anyways, I responded to this person's concerned comment about me mentioning the Holocaust with, I didn't bring up the Holocaust to correlate it with misandry and misogyny. Obviously, I continue by saying, I completely brought up the Holocaust as a concept and as a word because I'm differentiating that some words have objective meanings and definitions, but if we don't apply cultural, historical, and societal context to them, they're not going to have any meaning in those departments. As for what I need to research, I really do not know what you're talking about because I believe that everything I have said about the patriarchy is true. So when it's like, yo, these people are avoiding the cultural, societal, and historical context of misandry. That within itself is a semantic limitation, and they fail to observe how misogyny is a more prevalent problem than misandry. One of them even said themselves that they are concerned that misandry has systemic negative outcomes. And after watching this video, you don't see anything wrong with their sentiments. Like God forgive your soul, man. I don't even believe in God that much, but God forgive your soul. Anyways, that's like about all I wanted to say. That's like kind of the end of the comment thread. But that's my response, you know. Don't be like these people. That's my personal advice. That's my personal moral of the story. Don't make semantic limitations of words because you're just not going to get the historical, cultural, and societal context of certain words. But anyways, that's about it. See ya.